Welcome guys to this tutorial series where we are doing this animated human with the simulated clothes.
So I want to show you how I created this procedural leather material, which is kind of a mix of rough and raw leather and a more coated and treated leather. And this mix is blended with an image texture of some tileable leaves and flowers that I generated in Midjourney. This is what the pattern looks like, and you can download it for free by following the link in the video description. All the assets in this tutorial series can be downloaded for free by clicking the link in the video description that takes you to my website, where you enter your details, click go to free assets and then download. The free assets contains 3D files such as accessories, camera rig, clouds and shaders. You will also access a guide for your blueprints as well as some image textures we used during the process. And if you want to create your own pattern, I can show you quickly how I did it. So in Midjourney I just wrote tileable seamless pattern, flat design, mesh and roses, and style as to 750. This is actually not the way to make something tileable, so this is not like a proper tileable pattern. If you want to make it tileable, you can write this line, line and then tile, and then it will make sure that it's more seamless. And it is possible to easily convert this image into a normal map and a height map using a free software called Materialize. So I created a separate tutorial for how to do that, and you can find a link to that in the video description. However, in this specific case, we actually achieve a better result using the original image. So let's go back to Blender and take a look at the node setup. And this node setup is a little bit complicated. I will go through it as well as I can, but I will also upload it among the other free resources that you can download in the link in the video description. So in that way you can copy the material or study it more in detail by yourselves. So here we have the full node setup of the leather jacket. And let's look at the major groups we have here and how they are connected. I've categorized these groups by color. So the teal color ones, they are for base color or diffuse. The yellow ones, they are for normal map. And the purple/blue ones, they are for displacement map. For you to be able to preview the nodes, you need to have Node Wrangler activated. So if you don't have that, click Edit, Preferences, go to Add-ons and type Node here in the search field. And then you find Node Wrangler and activate it here. The first group is what I call the base pattern. It's basically the grains of the leather. And it's based on a Voronoi texture that is kind of distorted in the vectors by using some noise textures. The base pattern is going to be used for color, but it's also going to be inputted into bump and displacement. To give the leather jacket a little bit of a worn look, you can add some scratches. So this is what the base of the scratches look like. And they are created in a similar way as the base pattern above. So we use a Voronoi texture that is distorted by some noise. And then we combine it with noise to create a more scattered look. And you see that the output from the scratches is also going in different directions, and that is because it's also used both for color, bump and displacement. And when it comes to color, we want to mix the base pattern with the scratches. So that is what we have done up here, and I call it color main. So basically the output of this one is the scratches and the base pattern put together through this color ramp to give it this look. But only having this pattern together with the scratches looks too regular. So what I've done is to create some color variation. I've done a small scale one and a large scale one. And the color variation is basically just a noise. So this is a smaller noise, and then this one is a larger noise. And I mix them together here. And the factor for mixing them is also a noise texture. So this is the way we achieve this kind of random result. In next step, we mix the noise with the original color and the scratches, and it looks like this. And on top of that, I added a brightness contrast node that reduces the brightness a tiny bit, which results in this look. So now we basically have our color here, but I wanted to add an effect to the color as well. So I mixed the output here with a color effect. And this color effect is an ambient occlusion node together with a layer weight node. So with the layer weight, we make a difference depending on what angle we watch the clouds. And with the ambient occlusion, we create some shadows where materials are close to each other. And we blend those two together. And we multiply it with the original color. And then we bump up the saturation and the value a little bit to achieve this color. And this is what we are sending to the base color, which is over here. Principal BSDF jacket. So now when you have an idea of how the base color was created, we can have a look at the normal map instead. So we go back to the first yellow box and let's preview the bump. And now we can probably guess where the input comes from. It is the base pattern that we have in the first bump map, and we plug it into the height, and we use a brightness, contrast, and a map range just to adjust a little bit how the bump map appears. And then we combine this bump map with another bump map. So basically we plug the normal from this bump into the normal of another bump map, and then we plug the height from the scratches into the height of the second bump. So let's preview. And the scratches are not so easily visible, but if we look really close, we can see them here. So this bump node represents the base pattern and the scratches, but we're not finished there. So we bring the normal from this bump node into next bump node. And the next bump node is where we add the seams that we brought from Marvelous Designer. So the texture for the seams is this one, and then we compress the values a bit to get whiter seams, and that we plug into the height of this bump node. But we have yet another bump node, which is the flower pattern that we brought from Midjourney. So if we look at the texture for the flower pattern, it is this one, and then we bring it through a hue saturation node, and we desaturate it, and then we bring it through a brightness contrast node, where we brighten it a bit and increase the contrast, and then we bring that into the height of this bump node. And this bump node is what we plug into the normal of this principal BSDF. And that is what achieves this kind of mixed look between the smooth surfaces and rough surfaces. So most of the perceived roughness is actually not coming from the roughness value, but from the normal and from the displacement. But as you see, we actually have something plugged into roughness, so we can check where is that coming from. So it's actually coming from this node, which is a brightness contrast node, and this node is basically a tweak on the output from the base pattern. So what we are using for roughness is actually this pattern, but we just change a little bit the brightness and the contrast to flatten it out. So now we have gone through the color and the bump map. So let's just have a look at the displacement. For the displacement, we are more or less doing the same thing as for the bump map. So we are taking the base pattern and the scratches. The output from these two go into a multiply node, and those values look like this together. And then we take that value and bring into another mix node where we're adding the top stitching. And then we multiply that with our flower texture. We modify the values a tiny bit with the map range, and we bring it into the displacement texture here. So now you hopefully have an idea of how we created the base color, the roughness, the normal map, and the displacement map. However, you may have noticed that there is one more shader over here, and this is the shader for the stitches. And then I refer to the top stitching. And these two shaders, they are mixed with a mix shader node, and this mix shader has a factor that is of course controlled by the seams. So basically the seams were plugged into this map range to get this strong white value, and this is controlling the blend between this leather material and the stitching material. If you're gonna use this leather material for animated clothes, then there is one very important thing I need to tell you. So you need to switch all your texture coordinate inputs to UV. And I'm gonna tell you why. Because when you're using the object as the vector input, we're using the object's origin as the reference point for the coordinates. And when you're using a mesh cache, the origin stays while the mesh is moving. So let's see what happens when the origin stays and the mesh is moving. I will temporarily disconnect this material and create a new one. So let's add a Voronoi pattern, and we can plug the color into the surface, and then we can press Ctrl T to get our mapping node and texture coordinate node, and we plug the object into the vector. So now we have this pattern here. So let's see what happens when we play the animation. As you can see, the texture is animating while the character is moving. And if we zoom out a bit, we see that the origin is here and it has remained in the same position while the character has moved forwards. But if we use the UV coordinates instead, and then we play the animation again, then you see that the texture is following the animation of the clothes, which is logic because it's UV unwrapped. And something to pay attention to is that when you switch from generated or object to UV, you may have to adjust the scaling a bit, which you can do in here. So let's connect our original material. We can delete these nodes. And if you want proper displacement, you should go to the material tab here, scroll down to surface, and then you set this displacement parameter to displacement and bump. It's set normally to bump only, but this one allows the mesh to actually displace. That is how we create this full node setup. I hope I managed to convey to you the principles of creating this material, but I also recommend you to download this material that I put up for free, so you can study the details and tweak it to your own liking. So in the next video I'm going to show you how you can take the jeans texture we created in Marvelous to a more interesting jeans texture with a slightly more advanced node setup.
Like, subscribe and share this tutorial with your friends. See you in the next video.